Two political bozos on the left coast are advocating something that is going to wind up putting all of California in a state of constant danger if they follow what those two bozos want them to do. I'm Dr. Fred, and you're listening to Behind Enemy Lines, a program from Study Grow Know.
Hello and welcome to Behind Enemy Lines with Dr. Fred DeRuvo. In this program, we go where liberals fear to tread, discussing politics and issues from a conservative perspective. Thank you for joining us, and now, your host, Dr. Fred DeRuvo.
Well, thank you for joining me. This is Dr. Fred. I normally do Study Grow Know, but I'm kind of expanding here a bit, and I want to do something called Behind the Enemy Lines, which focuses more directly on specifically political problems and issues facing our nation. And what I want to talk about today, for just a very brief time here, about 10, 12, 13 minutes, is something that's happening on the West Coast right now. And to me, it is absolutely unconscionable. I mean, the fact that law enforcement can act with such disdain for human life is beyond reason. That's one thing. But then you got two morons who are actually senators and have been senators in California for years and show no sign of going away. You've got two people who actually are stupid enough to suggest what they're suggesting. For those of you who really don't know what I'm talking about, you haven't been following the news. Ex-cop Chris Dorner has been fired by the LAPD and has gone on a rampage. He has left a 22-page manifesto. Generally speaking, though, only about 11 pages of it are being reported by any of the mainstream news. They're leaving out huge chunks of it because it shows Chris Dorner to be a left-loving liberal. He specifically points to people like Hillary Clinton, Obama, Biden, Joe Scarborough, Piers Morgan, and other leftists, and he holds them up to high praise. And this same individual has gone on a rampage and has already killed 2 or 3 people. They were unarmed. He has shot at and wounded police officers and basically has declared war on LAPD. Now, in the most recent situation that's taken place, we've got 2 women driving a Tacoma, blue Tacoma, in Torrance, California. They were basically delivering papers. Now, apparently the cops did not realize what they were doing and simply started shooting at them because the vehicle they were driving was similar to the one that Chris Dorner, ex-cop, rogue, also drives. So I guess if you have a Tacoma that's light blue, you might not want to drive it until this moron is picked up by the police. But without making a positive ID, officers unloaded, get this, unloaded some 40 bullets into their vehicle. And they were in a residential neighborhood at the time. Now, if you go to my webpage, StudyGrowKnow.blog.com. That's StudyGrowKnow, K-N-O-W, blog.com. I've got all the links for it, and I discussed this story as well. But the reality is, these 2 women delivering papers were in a residential neighborhood at the time, and police officers, without first making a positive identification, went ahead and shot up their truck with them in it. They were not killed, fortunately. They were injured. Both women were taken to the hospital. But it really does not shock me that no one was killed. You heard that correctly. It does not shock me that no one was killed because all too often, unfortunately, and by the way, I have great respect for police officers, excuse me, and what they do. Unfortunately, too many of them do not spend enough time at the gun range, honing their skills. You know, it's difficult enough to shoot with a handgun and hit something, depending on how far away the target is, and depending upon the length of the barrel of your gun and the caliber of the weapon that you're using. But these police officers opened fire on these two women without taking the precaution of knowing their target and not obviously being concerned about how far beyond the target bullets would travel. It's just unbelievable. I'm quoting now from one of the sources. One of the victims sustained a minor gunshot wound and is in the process of being released. Another victim is in stable condition with 2 gunshot wounds. And again, I've got links for these quotes on my webpage. This all took place in Torrance, California, and another shooting took place in Torrance that same day as well. Now, look, I realize that tensions are very high with this ex-cop, Christopher Dorner, lunatic, left-wing lunatic. And I want to emphasize that, left-wing lunatic. Chris Dorner is on the loose. He has declared war on the LAPD and the citizens of California. However, this does not give police the right to shoot at whatever moves simply because someone is driving a vehicle that is quote-unquote similar to Dorner's. I guess if Dorner was driving a one of, that would be one thing. But it's not like only one Tacoma vehicle was made and then the mold was destroyed. I mean, for goodness sake, this is getting ridiculous. This is getting ridiculous. Meanwhile, we've got those on the left who are loved by Dorner. And I'm not saying or implying that it is their fault that this guy is doing what he's doing and has done what he's done. I'm simply pointing out what the news refuses to point out, that this guy was on the left. And if we do our research in history, we will notice that most of the massacres that take place in this country are done by left-wing morons. And yet the news, the mainstream news, tries to do everything they can to paint these people right-wing conservatives. But those on the left who are loved by Dorner, O'Biden, Obama, Clinton, Piers Morgan, Joe Scarborough, Chris Matthews, and a bunch more, they're silent. What are they going to say? And again, I'm not saying it's their fault. But if this Dorner had been throwing names of people on the right around, these same lefties would be using that as a form of persecution, and it would fill our TV screens and radio airwaves constantly. Yet Dorner gives obeisance to the left. And what do we hear? Crickets. Well, I'm glad Sean Hannity, Michelle Malkin, and a few others have taken the time to point this out, and I join with them. According to one news source, get this, 10,000 police officers are conducting door-to-door searches in the hopes of finding Chris Dorner, who was last known, by the way, trying to steal a boat from an elderly gentleman so he could escape to Mexico. Now, of course, let's not forget, this actually ties in with the 2 political bozos on the left coast. Here's what they're doing. Senator Dianne Feinstein and Senator Barbara Boxer. They are asking people to lay down their weapons while police attempt to find Dorner. Can you believe that? They have actually made desperate pleas for their California constituents to turn in their guns and not confront this crazed gunman, because that would be a perfect test of the senators' anti-gun proposals. So they're basically wanting Californians to become guinea pigs so that it will put to test whether or not their anti-gun proposals are good, whether they're valid, whether they will accomplish anything or not. And of course, I'm sure, by the way, forgive my sarcasm here, I'm sure that Senator Feinstein was the first to turn in her weapon, right? She carries a weapon legally with a valid concealed weapons permit, and I'm sure that she has already turned in her weapon. Well, if that isn't stupid enough what they're saying, check this quote out. Quote, "The senators feel the best course of action is to remove all weapons from law enforcement and private citizens so that no one else gets hurt," said a Senate communications intern. "When the gunman realizes that nobody else is armed, he will lay down his weapons and turn himself in. That's just human nature," unquote. No, that's called stupidity, to think that someone who is actually in the realm of lunacy is going to think like that. You heard me right. Feinstein and Boxer believe that if people will turn in their guns, and not only private citizens, but also law enforcement, then Chris Dorner will see this and have no recourse but to turn himself in. You know, there is just no getting over stupid, is there? I don't believe it. I cannot believe it. So Feinstein and Boxer actually believe that if everyone, in a show of solidarity, from citizens to law enforcement, turned in their weapons, then Dorner would give up and he would turn himself in. You know, if this wasn't so scary to think that two people can actually think like this and mean it, if it wasn't so scary, it would be funny. Dorner has killed people who were not armed. He has shot at police officers, ambushing them, giving them no time to respond. I don't understand how people like Feinstein and Boxer keep getting reelected, because neither of them have enough brains between them to equal that of a chicken. This is madness. They both think that if everyone turns in their guns, it's going to be a perfect test of their anti-gun legislation, and they're both prepared for the fact that their idea will fail miserably if people did what they're asking. And of course, other Democrats in California are saying, yeah, that's a great idea. Well, except the cops. The cops should keep their guns, but all private citizens should turn theirs in. They actually want law enforcement to turn in their weapons. I mean, how asinine can two people be? Well, at least not everyone in the political arena of California sees things the way Feinstein and Boxer do. Here's a quote. Quote, Feinstein and Boxer want everybody to turn to go unarmed as a madman is running around shooting people, said a Riverside, California alderman. If that is the truth, I'm never going to San Francisco again. Something must be in the water to make them that insane, unquote. I can't believe it. I honestly cannot wrap my brain around the fact that these two numbnuts are putting this idea forth. People should actually lay down their weapons, both private citizens and police. What absolute morons. Keep going, Feinstein and Boxer. Maybe one day, if you keep up with the lunacy, the people of California will actually vote you both out of office. We can only hope. Well, I'm praying that this Dorner felon will be found, and he will be found quickly. It happens it really appears as though he has declared war on the police and the citizens of California. He obviously could care less about taking life. He has proven it by shooting and killing unarmed people. Now, this is no time to lay down weapons. It is time to realize that this guy means business and he has absolutely nothing to lose. He will shoot again. He will probably kill again if he is not caught, and he won't go peacefully. I would urge all people in California, especially law enforcement, to keep their weapons loaded and handy. Chris Dorner has proved he plays for keeps, and shooting another person is not going to make any difference to him at all. You know, I truly cannot believe how the left thinks. Maybe that's the problem. They don't think. They simply open their mouths and unintelligible garbage comes out. And they do it with a straight face. And they expect people to take them as sane and intelligent. Folks, I am so glad that I left California. Going on 2 years now. I would encourage all individuals with the ability to think critically to do one of two things. Either get out of California while the getting's good, or vote those two morons out of office. It's obviously run by lunatics and is fast becoming a police state. This is absolutely amazing to me. It's unbelievable that anybody who wants to be seen as intelligent could put forth such a stupid, reprehensible, lunatic idea as giving up your weapons to become completely defensive so that you have no recourse against a moron like Chris Dorner. Well, that's our show. Thanks for joining me. God help us all.
You've been listening to Study, Grow, Know with Dr. Fred DeRuvo. Please join us each week for new broadcasts that deal with theology, prophecy, and political issues from a biblical, conservative perspective.